So that's what we're kind of working on with Odysee. Decentralization as it extends to users and creators, the overall benefit of more control being in the hands of the creators and users.
This podcast is sponsored by Coin ATM Radar. When buying crypto with cash, an ATM is much more reliable and safer than meeting some random person in a random place. And unlike an exchange, which could freeze your account, you truly own all the crypto you buy. With Coin ATM Radar, you could find crypto ATMs and other services where you can buy and sell cryptocurrencies for cash. On their website, you can search by coin, address, if the ATM supports selling as well as buying, and you can also search by geo area, country, state, city. You can also check and compare actual current fees at different ATMs. If you want to find out more, head over to coinatmradar.com, which is coinatmradar.com. Hey everyone, I have the fantastic pleasure of once again speaking with the one and only Julian Chandra of Odysee. How's it going, man?
It's going great. Thanks for having me, man. It's good to see you after such a long time. Yeah, it's great to be here.
Yeah, so for people who've been watching this channel for a long time, I've been publishing on, it started out as LBRY.tv, which was kind of the site for the LBRY network, and then I heard about this site called Odysee that was going to be built on the LBRY network, and so just my LBRY channel and everything kind of kept on going there. I believe we spoke somewhere in October of 2020, very briefly. Since then, it's been kind of a whirlwind where, first of all, I have been using Odysee without disruption that entire time. I just have not stopped using it. I published all my content on there, so at least a couple times a week, there's been some activity there. And then there was a whole issue with LBRY getting sued by the SEC and a bunch of stuff happening after that. And it seems like there's a lot of uncertainty or whatever surrounding the LBRY network. And then, therefore, a lot of people had questions about Odysee. But then, hey, a few months ago, Odysee popped back on the radar, said, hey, we're coming back. We're doing a bunch of cool new things. And an interesting bit was the whole announcement of a new blockchain and all that kind of stuff. But that's just kind of the huge, the basic sort of recap from my perspective. So for those who have not been on the same path as me, how would you, what's the pitch of, what's Odysee? Like, what is it? How would you describe it kind of?
The easiest way to understand what Odysee is just think of it as a video sharing platform. We target a specific niche though, so it's probably not a fair comparison to compare Odysee to YouTube, though that might be the default comparison. Odysee is more targeted towards independent, smaller creators and channels that don't have the big UGC push of a platform like YouTube behind them or a media house behind them. So a lot of the popular content on the bigger platforms, they're sponsored, licensed. We don't have any of that. And another aspect of Odysee is we are working towards a path of decentralization. So what that means is if you're a user of Odysee and you're accessing certain content, or you're a creator and you're publishing on Odysee, there are certain qualities of the application. One being, as a creator, you're going to specify the licensing terms of how you want your content to be distributed and monetized. And secondly, because we'll be decentralized, that speaks to our ability to afford the community of users like a freedom of expression and I guess you could say protections from corruption, whereby content they're used to accessing is taken down because there's no single point of control. So that's what we're kind of working on with Odysee. Decentralization as it extends to users and creators, the overall benefit of more control being in the hands of the creators and users.
Yeah, so that sounds, obviously great, and it's a great kind of sort of extension of the original sort of vision that a lot of people bought into for Odyssey. They a lot of the I guess messaging was around some of the same principles, but it seems like it's a more complete vision now. And so the transition part is kind of particular interest because Odyssey was something, and as far as I know, still is as of right now, something that leveraged the LBRY blockchain, and the LBRY company behind the blockchain had a lot of issues with the SEC, and there's a lot of uncertainty. And then it appears that Odysee is going to be now working off of something called Arweave. So would you quickly describe what what prompted this idea for transition? Like, what were the circumstances that made Odysee decide to switch to a different tech stack, essentially? And yeah, I'll just start there.
Yeah, that's a great question. And in full transparency, it's a two-pronged answer. So on the first hand, we know that LBRY had a lawsuit with the SEC, and they ran out of capital. So LBRY actually found Arweave as a prospective owner for us. They had estimated Arweave to be a good full stack technology for us to build on top of. One that could achieve the vision that they had for themselves. And secondly, from our side of things, like the Odysee perspective, we felt that Arweave fully understood our mission and goals and what we were trying to achieve with Odysee. And they extended total support for us to figure things out and do it our way. So it really is, that is the complete answer. We were very excited to see what was within the Arweave stack that we could use and, meet other builders within the ecosystem. Because when we're building on LBRY, the SEC lawsuit kind of overshadowed their own company's development efforts. And now it was like, okay, we can actually focus on building and working towards this goal.
Yeah, for sure. It's so myself, I have been in the crypto world for over a decade at this point, and things change very quickly. It's so that was probably the first I'd personally heard of Arweave, because I'm just heads down in a bunch of other things. And so can you quickly describe what Arweave is and kind of like what does it do and what does it sort of do better or differently than other main competitors, just to understand what is Arweave?
The first definition is that it's a decentralized storage network. So that's the first benefit that it affords to us, in that we have a lot of data to store, and they provide a blockchain by which we can store all of that data, which is very cool, because with LBRY we could really only just write the metadata to the chain. With Arweave we can store the data. But another benefit of Arweave is that the data is hosted or stored permanently. So that's very important for data preservation and just for the business of what we do. There are other things that are being built within that ecosystem as well. One thing that we're working on together in collaboration with builders within the Arweave ecosystem is something called a decentralized media ecosystem. And in the simplest way possible, essentially we're building the social protocol, all the foundational building blocks, so that there can be millions of Odysseys building within this network. So if we go down, well, there's Odysee 2, 3, 4, 1000. And all of the data within this network will be surfaceable by all of these other applications, provided they adhere to the licensing terms that the creator has put in place for their content. We envision this DME to be something of like a universe of all kinds of media applications, and later other kinds of UGC type things as well, user generated content.
I think that makes a lot of sense from a high level, because so first of all, on that whole vision, Odysee is focusing on just being Odysee for now, right? And so these other Odysseys out there in the potential cosmos of the ecosystem, is that a focus of Odysee itself? Is that something that the Arweave ecosystem itself is building out, and it just sort of separate to things, or like how does that? Who would be spearheading many of these other things, or is that just like a this could happen easily kind of a thing?
Oh, our company, our business is actively focusing on the development of that social protocol layer, in collaboration with the many teams within the Arweave ecosystem. It's not all on us. It's a very gigantic task to take on, but that's what we're actively building on, working towards building. We are still maintaining Odysee at the same time. You may have noticed, being a user of Odysee, Joel, that we haven't released many new features in a while, and that's because we are preoccupied with the building of this DME.
Yeah, for sure. It's so just on like a slightly more technical level, which I mean, obviously, maybe some listeners just don't care, but I do know there are a few that have been library users themselves, for example, and have looked at things under a block explorer. So my understanding of the way library worked is that the claims around content, including all the metadata and all those, were published into blockchain transactions on the blockchain, and then the actual data storage was handled by library nodes in something called blob files, which is basically something similar to like a torrent style thing where you have pieces of content that then get seeded across the whole network. And so the blockchain part was only for the metadata, and then nodes happen to have this data storage system as well. How is Arweave different? How would the setup be different on Arweave from that?
You've perfectly described the former model. The dependence of, essentially users to host that data, and Odysee was pretty much the biggest, I guess you could say, seed for the library network. We are still figuring out that piece on the for the new vision, how all of that hosting and serving is going to take place. Incentivization models are still being figured out as well. But it will be very different from that model you just described. But we won't end up with a situation where it's just Odysee hosting all of the data, and the library network needs Odysee to host that data for it to function. Well, I guess you could say, because I mean, technically, library is still going to exist, and anyone can, host that data. It's just the unwillingness to do that. So I'm sorry, I can't really give you all of those details right now. We're still trying to figure it out on our side.
Yeah. Now, as far as you know, is the Arweave network itself, does it have the capability to do all of this? And I know you haven't figured out how exactly it'd be structured, but so basically there is a functionality for the Arweave network itself to store large files and stuff like that, as well as metadata. So even though you haven't figured out how you're going to plug in on top of it, it is very doable on that network, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're experimenting with different, approaches, and with each approach, we're looking at the potential like incentivization models for each approach. We do know we can store the data, like the video file itself, on the chain, and we've tested, delivering the delivery of that video as well, and that works fine. It's just, I guess the big thing is around the incentivization piece. We're close. It's testing things at scale, and like just because we have a theory of something working, it's just a theory until we know that thousands of users and tens of thousands of users will participate. We can't say for sure. So yeah, probably not the answer you were looking for, but it is quite, it's still relatively early. But you know, progress is being made. We're seeing things very differently today than we were just 2 weeks ago. So yeah, but when we do have more information, you'll be the first person I'd speak to share those details with.
Yeah, absolutely. So then the plan sort of in the meantime is to continue to host stuff on the LBRY network and just operate. And then at some point there's a transition period where the data starts to be migrated to a different chain, I'd assume.
Yeah, but I'd put it a little bit differently. We'll continue to write the metadata to the LBRY chain. Like LBRY's not hosting data, like the actual video.
Yeah.
So we'd do that. Yeah, we can't, like, yeah, there's also no timeline in terms of when we can say, hey, we're going to be off the LBRY network altogether. We just know that it's coming. And yeah, we envisage it's the very minimum 6 months, but it could come sooner. We're not unsure just right now.
Yeah. It's so for the end user or the creator, is there something they have to be aware of at this point? Like they have to be ready to do something to transition, or do they just keep on using Odysee, and as updates come out, then they'll just keep following the updates?
Hey, for most creators, people that are publishing to Odysee directly, we're making this whole transition as seamless as possible. They're not really going to notice anything. I guess the user that's more familiar with the LBRY side of things, the desktop users and things like that, the power users, they may want to export their wallet and do that before the transition is in place. But looking at the rate of LBC being distributed and who's actually collecting and doing something with it, most of this is going to go unnoticed.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, so big ambitious plan. What are some of the, moving away from like the underlying tech stack thing and kind of doing the user thing from the perspective of just Odysee or the single Odysee or whatever, from the perspective of the end user who's viewing content, accessing content, paying for things, tipping, all that. What kind of features or changes are you anticipating seeing over the next couple of years for just a user experience, the front end kind of thing?
Yeah, from that perspective, all of the things that we wanted to build for them that have kind of gone on the back burner side of things as we're focusing on just, rebuilding Odysee on top of Arweave, we want to do all of those, get back to work on those initiatives as well. So live streaming, we want that to be rebuilt in a fully decentralized way. As an example, other features that our users were looking for, like better privating features, better scheduling options, these are all things that we want to work on as well. Auto transcribing, subtitle features, work on all of these things, bring it up to a parity with YouTube, so that they can all be satisfied with that experience for them. Looking at Odysee as it is today, though, it is in a pretty good position. Like, it does have parity with with YouTube for a lot of the basic features, but some of the things, like the community wants, things like better editing tools of a video, where if they were to upload directly, they could do things within application. These are all things that we'd want to get back to working on once we have rebuilt Odysee on Arweave. But I guess if we're looking at things in terms of order of priority, we have made the determination that it is of utmost importance, especially the way things are going, that we just make Odysee into this decentralized service first of all, have a DME up and running, because the climate is pretty risky for being a media platform today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, for people who just don't know because they're not in your shoes or any of this stuff, you mentioned media platforms being kind of risky today. Some people who are more kind of in tune with this kind of thing have dealt with, censorship requests or whatever, all these kinds of things over the years. But for people who are kind of like out of the loop a little bit, what are some of these sorts of challenges that get faced, that traditional platforms, legacy Web 2 platforms, get hit with, that maybe people don't really know about because they're behind the scenes? And how are you hoping to get these fixed? How would things be different under the Odysee vision come to life?
Well, I mean, okay. So just speaking as if people within your audience have no idea what's been going on in the industry. Governments have been knocking on the doors of various platforms, even platforms that champion themselves as free speech platforms, and they say essentially, take down this content, and this content may not necessarily be illegal, but it's political, or there's something controversial about it in the given region that it's being served in. And the platform says, and they stipulate, take this down or we're banning you, or something like that. And these platforms generally just comply, or they may just say, oh, we're leaving your market altogether because we don't want to take it down. Both of those things are problematic responses. On the first hand, well, you're taking down content that, from what we've seen in the news, is just content that rivals the political party in power. So that's a problem, because it's not really freedom of speech in that case. Second, if you're leaving a market, sure, you can evaluate, did you have many users in that market? Is that the reason you're leaving? Or if you are just leaving and you did have users in that market, that's a pretty bad response to the people that were using you in that specific market. That's a lot of people to leave behind.
Absolutely.
And this is happening to big applications like Twitter, Rumble, etc.
It's problematic the way some of these platforms have responded to these kinds of things.
Yeah, and you can kind of see the way these platforms have gone about dealing with the requests that they've been getting from governments and various, institutions. You could kind of see that there is no other alternative way that they could have addressed these requests, because they're centralized businesses.
Yeah, there's a door to knock on.
There's a door to knock on. There's a single point of failure. So we know what we need to do with Odysee is focus more on a network versus, hey, just join our platform where it's platform and trust us. With the network approach, or the DME approach, essentially there's no point of control. There's all of these different people hosting the content. It's more safer for the content. It's more safer for the users. It's more safer for the creator.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite the satisfactory answer, because you kind of get to see the way things are playing out with over the last few years. You started to see social media censorship really ramp up, and then you're starting to see with the Twitter/X turnaround has been fascinating to watch if you're really paying attention to the details, because on the one hand, things have, in my opinion, vastly improved over the way they were, and then also you still see them bumping up against the fringes of control, where there's like the entire situation in Brazil. Like, there's some content that was supposed to be censored in Brazil, and so then X sort of went to war with Brazil over that, and now I don't remember where it got resolved recently, but as far as I know, it was actually banned in the country for a while. I have some Brazilians who are accessing it through VPNs and other services like that, or trying to get around that. And then at the same time, seeing users demonetized or banned or whatever, most not, but on some of the fringes on some certain things. And then the battle with like hate speech and the anti-Semitism arguments and all that. And you could see you can see exactly how far our good old friend Elon Musk can go before there's just running the walls. It's like in games, it's like when you have like the edge of the universe where you start just like running into you just can't run any further. It's like you sort of see that happening right there. And they're definitely not having those restrictions sounds like some sort of a dream, you know?
Right. I mean, look, I'm not sure if you're aware or not, but there's been a bunch of independent reporting that's been done just looking at X, the way they've been handling takedown censorship requests versus before the Elon takeover. Today, X has been censoring, complying with more takedown requests than the previous Twitter. So that's quite telling. We need to move towards a model where there isn't like a lord presiding over, moderation. So yes, this is not me saying there would be no moderation, but in the DME worldview, every single platform is responsible for what they're hosting. And if they are hosting something illegal, then the accountability is on that particular portal, is what we're going to be calling all the different, front-end operators within the DME. We think this is a more appropriate approach than just having one single authority determining what should stay, what shouldn't, what should be actioned, and what shouldn't. Because like if you look at all of these different companies, Odysee and X and whatever else is out there, they can get things wrong. I mean, so it's better to have more eyes on some of these things, these requests, and the way you get that is by having much more platforms within a network, hosting the same data and making calls on that.
Yeah, almost localizing it a little bit more.
Right.
Yeah, that it's been fascinating to watch how the world has moved in this direction under this, under the behind the scenes, I guess, the new technology. I do remember, obviously, in the early days of the cryptocurrency world, when we have, you have a lot of centralized exchanges as being what runs things, and then people seeking privacy use a lot of centralized mixers that would just like disappear with everyone's money once in a while or get shut down, and then we migrated to kind of the what I would call like the Tornado Cash style model, or that era, or the Uniswap style model, or whatever, where there's a immutable smart contract running, but you still have a VC funded company developing on top of it and running the portals and all that. And then there's some court cases ongoing now with some of those people. And then one of the first that I've seen to sort of bump up against all this has been Thorchain, the cross-chain AMM DAX protocol. And I do remember that Thor Swap, one of the major, and as far as I understand, US-based portals to the network, came under fire because of some stolen funds were being traded through the protocol. And I think that I had the Thorchain founder who recently publicly doxed himself after being anonymous for a few years, came on my show and was talking about that. And he basically said that they found the sweet spot where these sort of portals can just integrate some very basic sort of transaction analytics and filtering, and the network is still there, it's still robust, anyone can still trade or use on it. You can craft your own memos for swaps yourself, you can plug into some different portal somewhere else that lets you kind of go through, but then the people who get in trouble if illegal activity is happening there have the ways of protecting themselves from liability. And so this whole vision does seem like something that's, get some of the smarter people in the room are starting to catch on to and sort of figuring out like, this is the right balance. This is how we maintain full decentralization and censorship resistance, but still manage to make it work in the real world where people can, go to jail over stuff like this.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up. The vision also isn't one that is entirely new. There have been other blockchain companies that have been talking about doing something similar and trying to do this present day. But I think this is where a difference of approach and ability to affect the actual vision comes into play, because for example, we get hit up by all of these different blockchain companies that say, hey, you can already do these things, why don't you just use us, blah blah blah. You could probably guess what they're asking us about, right? We think we're a better placed to address the actual creation of something like a DME and do it successfully because we have the users, the content as well. And look, I don't want to attack other blockchain applications and services and things like that.
But
what
by
they're
all
trying
means,
to do.
do so. Just but
it's just you can have a theory for something, and you can say this is what we're already doing, but you're not. You don't have people using it. You've created essentially ghost towns, villages, etc. We're very careful with everything that we're working on right now to actually create something that will be used by millions of users. So the Odysee users that we have, like 7 or 8 million registered users, we hope that they will actually use things within the DME. So we think we're in we're in a better position to release something and have it be successful. Yeah,
that does make sense to me as well, because I remember from the humble origins of Odysee to where we are now. There was a time, and I'm not sure if it's still the case, but it could very well be, where Odysee is one of the most used decentralized applications, or applications built on decentralized infrastructure out there, and
still is today by a large margin. It's number one.
Yeah, and that's yeah. Sorry.
Sorry, no. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. But there's something interesting behind that. Like, a lot of those within the crypto world have not, or blockchain world, Web3 world, call it what you will, have not heard of us, because so many people within that world essentially just are like bag holders, shillers of a particular token chain. There is no utility in what they're holding and proclaiming or asking us to build on. But and the interesting thing is, like, most Odysee users have no idea that it's built on top of a blockchain. So sorry, I just wanted to mention that.
Well, that's, of course, that might be part of the secret to all this. And I've had so many run-ins with so many different, as you mentioned, bag holders on these sorts of issues for many years. Even just over this weekend, I was making a request to see if there was a merchant tool that did a few of these things I wanted, so I could literally onboard my plumber, but also a few other people around me who said, oh, I've heard about this crypto, I want to take it. And then there's just there's a lot of well-meaning helpful comments and a lot of not unhelpful, but it's clear that people aren't living this life, that there's no recognition. Like, why don't you, I had someone say, I'm not going to call out the person in particular, but I had someone say, well, you don't need a merchant tool. It's everything you need is on the blockchain. They just get an address and they're there. And it's like, well, you realize this is like a plumber, right, who barely understands his own smartphone, for example. How is he going to just tap into the blockchain he's plug it into the matrix? Like, no, he needs an app to download and a button to say charge $68.89 USD, and it goes and then you can do it. That's what he needs. And just the lack of understanding from that explains a lot of where the space is.
You see that kind of example all the time. It's ridiculous. It's farcical on a superficial level. Like, these overly convoluted processes to begin with, you are just passing off as something, you can just do easily to regular layman people. No, that's why we've always focused on making things super intelligible and easy for people to use, and utility. Those are the two things. And that's why we think we're in a good position to succeed with our vision here versus so many other like blockchain companies that have tried. Um, yeah, we're not going to be building a ghost village here, and we're not motivated by price go up. We want to actually build something that has utility for regular people like the plumber in your example.
Yeah, for sure. And I do think, to a certain extent, also, having an existing user base is a great constraint because it constrains you from doing anything that's too monumentally stupid, because then you'll lose all your users. But if you don't have any users, you can be as stupid as you want.
Oh yeah. Like, I mean, there you see a lot of interesting, and I'll call them features, right? Very interesting, but no real use or like real adoption or
Like,
anything
who
like
wants
that.
this?
Yeah. So no, that's an excellent point, because if we make mistakes, we will lose our users.
Yeah, and they'll tell you, why doesn't this work? Well, why can't I do that? I want to do
Right.
this. And it just hits right away. And it is an interesting kind of dichotomy. I think that we're finally getting to the spot in the space where there's enough people, we're reaching enough saturation of the technology from a knowledge, like a base familiarity perspective and an investment perspective, where I think the next steps will have to be things that work for end users. And I think that you might start to see some of this over this year and the next. And certainly in 5 years from now, I think we're going to be in a very different world as far as what the actual apps and the users look like. Is that something that you kind of see, or are less optimistic, or more optimistic, or what?
Well, I would agree with you. I hope that timeline is actually shorter. Especially from our perspective, we build media applications, right? We feel that we need what we're working on right now, yesterday. It's not good enough for like I know what's out there in the world today isn't sufficient. It doesn't meet the requirements of layman users, layman creators. I really do think we need to have something good to go as soon as possible. And I know I said earlier, like, we can't really put a timeline on things. I mean, we're targeting something within 6 months, but even me saying that is quite irresponsible. But we know what we're working on is needed urgently, just looking at the way things are going in the industry, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Godspeed on that. If for people who want to follow more about the progress of Odysee and how things are going, where would you direct them to go?
Outside of the Odysee website itself, because we have a main channel, just odysee.com/@Odysee. You can find out all our updates there, or you can follow our Twitter account at Odysee Team. Oh, sorry, I should say X account. You can also follow me at JVL Chandra, JVLChandra. I share some updates on there as well. Yeah, that's probably the best starting points.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot for having this chat. I really, I hope people will watch this on Odysee as well. I'll be sharing that out primarily, but it'll also be other platforms. And I look forward to continuing to be a user, and also checking out all the new features and contributing to the Arweave ecosystem after this. So that'll be great.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. That's awesome. Thanks, Joel.
Yep. Thanks. Have a good one, everyone.